Hello, my fellow kin. Welcome back to the channel and welcome to another pro player interview. A really special pro player interview at that because we are speaking with not only the top performing Voltan player at the Cherokee Open of this year, but also the new best in faction Leagues of Voltan player coming out of the event. Ladies and gentlemen, say hello to Ronnie Kinney. Ronnie, how are you doing tonight?
I'm doing fantastic. How are you?
Very good, very good. So thank you again for coming on. We were just discussing this a little bit before we went live, but a massive thank you, of course, to having interest in coming on the channel. I know you had an incredibly busy week. The weekend that just passed was when Cherokee had occurred, I believe, and then you had stayed an extra day. You had mentioned. So I know we've both been very busy. I've been sick. You just recovered from a massive 8-game event, which is no small feat. So how was that experience for you?
It was definitely a lot of games. It's not what I expected when I was going into the event. There was 6 games last year, so I kind of expected to play 6 games. I
Mm-hmm.
expected the last 2 games to be like shadow rounds to finals,
Okay.
but then they're like, "Hey, no, surprise! You're playing all 8 games." So playing three days, 24 hours of Warhammer,
Oh my God.
um, it definitely puts a strain on the brain. I
Oh
don't know how much ibuprofen I've taken for my head, but
my. Yeah, you have to just like
it's a
microdose
lot.
medication during the rounds. That's crazy, man. So you said you went last year as well. Has it been a while now that you've been in the competitive scene?
So actually, I've only been playing for about an hour, or not hour, a year and a half.
Yeah.
So I started playing about October, November timeframe of 2023. I started with the Custodies.
Okay.
I played them very so I started playing and then immediately hopped into competitive
Nice. Okay.
because I'm a very competitive player just in whatever I play in.
Sure.
Um, so it started off with like a local teams event. It was a 3-man team. It
Okay.
was me and 2 of the buddies that I've hung out with through Warhammer. A couple guys came to the shop. They had Warhammer. I was playing Magic the Gathering, getting my butt kicked, so I decided I was gonna walk away from the game.
Okay.
But I was interested in what they were doing. They started playing Warhammer. I learned a little bit. I immediately bought like 2 boxes of Custodies.
Nice.
Started playing, played competitively, took them to Cherokee last year,
Mm-hmm.
and then not too long after that, I think about April timeframe of 2024 is when I picked up Votan, and I've been playing Votan competitively ever since.
Okay, nice. So relatively new entry into the competitive scene, like you said, just there from last year. Started off with Custodes. Pretty good choice, honestly, if I don't say so myself. Unbiased choice because for myself as well, that was one of my first armies that I also purchased when I started playing in the game. I think I said this story already before, but I don't think you saw the old GW website because this was beyond 2 years ago. This was like, I don't know, like maybe 8 years ago or something. They had these little tiny, like circular profile pictures, kind of like on Discord, to represent each faction. And the Custodes one was like mega cropped, like horribly sized to fit inside the frame. And it looked like a dwarf. And I was like, oh, sweet, this is the dwarf faction. I'll like start with these guys. And then I bought a set, and I was like, with these are like the biggest models I've ever seen inside of a mini game. There's no way these are dwarves. And then later on, a few armies later, dwarves finally came out, and then I joined the bandwagon as well.
I mean,
So
you're almost right.
I was almost right.
The new Shield Captain that came out
Oh yeah,
before they actually revealed it, people were like, "Oh, that looks like it could be Votan,"
there you
because the dude
go.
is just squatted.
Yeah, I
It's
think
just a
people are
really
still
bad
saying
Shield
it.
Captain model.
Yeah, it was a bad angle. That was funny. I remember the controversy surrounding that and the release. People were, I think we're all pretty desperate for new models at this point. Uh, Thankfully, that one isn't ours because it wasn't super nice in my opinion. But I digress. Yeah, I think that's pretty funny that we started off with kind of a similar trajectory in terms of what we were going for. But on the topic of Voltan, what made you gravitate from Custodes into Voltan for the competitive scene? Was it just like the rules at the time? Was there really something about the aesthetic, the army?
So I kind of like the idea of playing something different.
Mm-hmm.
And I play in my competitive scene. There's not a single Votan player.
Nice.
So on my team we have pretty much just about every army amongst us,
Mm-hmm.
and no one played Votan. So I was like, oh, this seems like a really cool army. And on paper it doesn't look great because the ballistic skills, the saves are horrible.
Mm-hmm.
But once you learn how to navigate the trade game, and proper movement positioning and when a good go turn would be.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like Votan's one of the best armies for it, and it just fits my playstyle because I am a huge advocate for MSU
Mm-hmm.
or multiple small units or
Yeah.
many small units. And
Yeah.
honestly, I get benefited for losing units, so might as well, you know, what's a good word for it? Capitalize on it.
For sure. For sure.
So like, hey, here's this. It's really good bait, and then they take the bait, and then you just punish them for it.
Yeah, I think so. That's super well said. I agree with you completely on the play style of Voltan. I know that a lot of people get into Voltan and they're like, oh, well, this army is like, it's bad at the game. It doesn't do anything. It doesn't have any tricks. But what Voltan does do extremely well is it rewards you for playing the fundamentals of the game correctly. It's like exceptionally good at playing regular 40k. And you have all the tools to accomplish all of your goals. Like you said, you take like an MSU, you lean into the design of the army, right? Like it's telling you to play a certain way. And when you do lean into that, you capitalize on that and you just commit to learning how that army functions. Not only do you get better at the game, but you also just have a really enjoyable army to play with.
Oh no, I completely agree. Like I said, I'm a huge advocate for the MSU, and Votan is one of those armies that, in addition to like Drakari, that just benefits
Mm-hmm.
you for losing those units and just playing the game. There's no tricks, no special things that Votan does that no other army naturally does for abilities.
Mm-hmm.
Um, we just do it just above average at a cost of units.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I think that's well said. I think that makes a lot of sense. Okay, so you get into Votan. I think you said about a year ago. You're interested in playing something a little bit different, which I think is pretty representative of a lot of Votan players because I don't think there are many people who play this army. Everywhere I go, someone's like, "Oh, Votan," and it's like, "Yeah." It's like I haven't seen this before. Like, what do you mean you haven't seen this before? We've been out for so long now. But yeah, I guess it was an army that probably went under a lot of people's radars with like the rules changes from ninth going into 10th and everything we lost with the previous rule set, which I never even had the army at the time. So for me, there's no loss in value there. But I heard we had some pretty cool rules. So I think that makes a lot of sense and is very relevant and representative of a lot of our experiences as well. So for Cherokee, you decided, I guess, just to go back, and you said you went already once in the past. Have you gone to a lot of other tournament events as well, or is Cherokee kind of like the big one you practice up for every year?
So I go to quite a few different events. Like I said, I'm on a competitive team called Keelhaul Gaming.
Mm-hmm.
We travel around. We've gone to the Team Battle Brothers GT. We've gone to ATC Chattanooga,
Oh,
the
nice.
biggest teams event in the U.S.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Also the February ATC event, and then there's also Mayhem GT, which is about 150 to 200 people.
Nice.
Also in the local area.
Okay, great. Yeah. I mean, you guys have in like middle US area, like you guys have an incredibly good competitive scene for Warhammer. A lot of great players in that area. I know people on the Discord have been trying to get me to go down and visit, but it's a little bit far from Canada. But yeah, I'm envious of the competitive scene you guys have there. It's pretty cool. Um, all right, so let's talk a little bit about Cherokee then and the event. Let me just pull your list up here so I could follow along. So you have a lot of teams background experiences, is what I gather here. Was there any inspiration from that going into this list?
So it's ish. So I've actually have not taken this list to a teams event. The first teams event that I took Votan for, I didn't take a single land fortress, and I took double Terminator bricks,
Okay.
just to maximize my ability to handle volume,
Mm-hmm.
and because a lot of the people on my team could not handle volume.
Mm-hmm.
I never really tailor lists to teams.
Okay.
I just take a very solid list to teams events that I also play in singles events because Votan, like I said, just capitalizes on opponents making mistakes
Mm-hmm.
or just trading in the game.
Yeah.
So it's a good all around army. There's not necessarily a horrible matchup for Votan,
Mm-hmm.
but there's also not a lot of just amazing perfect matchups for Votan.
Mm-hmm.
It's just based off how you build your list.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. In my experience, so up until I'd say the most recent like patch of the game, like the Grotmas patch, the Space Marine patch and all that, like I've been doing a triple land fort list for a really long time. I'd say for probably the better half of the last year. And like you said, there isn't really a horrible matchup in the sense that like I've never gotten tabled. Like if I lose, it's you lose by a little bit, and if you win, you usually win by a little bit also. It's never really like a massive blowout unless someone completely botches the game and makes like a super big error, like and exposes something early. Because, like you said, Votan really likes to take a couple turns to set themselves up and then just do like a big push, a big all-in turn, and that's usually where you close the game off. So I think that makes a lot of sense too. And with the MSU as well, I kind of struggled with that a little bit too. So like I said, I don't know if this was before we got on the recorded call, but I have my team event, my first one ever, coming up on this weekend, and trying to design a list for that. I really struggled to like say like okay like what should I be trying to do differently here. And this is an 8-man event. There's some people on my team I haven't even met, so I wasn't like 100% sure what like the composition or like the strat was. And ultimately, I ended up just having the same conclusion you just said, where it's like, I don't think you could really build specifically for this. Like, I think you're just building a good Votan list that could take basically as many opponent lists as possible and like have a really good even game and just like lean into that trading nature of the army. So that makes a lot of sense then in terms of how your thought process was going into this event. You have some pretty interesting picks, so I'll let you walk us through your list, and I have a few questions here that I'd like to ask you. One in particular, I'm really curious to hear about. So I'll let you take it from the top here in terms of what you brought.
All right, so I brought a Brokir Ironmaster.
Okay.
I brought the Ironheart Champion, no enhancements across the board. 2 units of 10 warriors. I took the High-Las Rotary Cannon and the High-Las Auto Rifle,
Mm-hmm.
as well as the Meta Pack and the Pan Special Scanners.
Mm-hmm.
I took 3 Sagitars, each one with a High-Las Beam Cannon. 1 unit of 6 Thunderkin with the Graviton Blast Cannons
Mm-hmm.
for the anti-vehicle. 3x5 Grenade Launcher Hammer Berserkers.
Mm-hmm.
A 5-man of Dev Wound Hearthguard. 2 units of bikes, 2 land fortresses with the conversion beamers, and then 1x10 Jaegers.
Okay.
With knives and plasma knives, or the knives and revolvers.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, okay, cool. And your bikes were minimum size squads, right? You had
Correct.
just
Just three
three-mans?
mans.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, so a really cool list. Now, I think right out the gate, my question is on no enhancements. So usually, I'm a massive advocate for appraising glare. Like, I just think there's a ton of native value in having that. It helps you play the trade game a little bit better too. Sets you up for like goal turns if you need to like absolutely take an objective or take like a side of the table. How like how did you feel about having that enhancement in your list? I'm not used to seeing it here.
So normally I do play the Appraising Glare. Normally I wouldn't have an Iron Master, but that's just a model that I've recently come to thoroughly enjoy.
Mm-hmm.
I used to run Double Hammer Champion with the Appraising Glare on one of them,
Okay.
and I had another Sagitar. I had no Terminators. Pretty much I swapped the 5 Terminators for 3 more Thunderkin, a
Sure.
Sagitar, and got an enhancement, downgraded the Iron Master to a Hammer Champion. But I'm a big fan of the Appraising Glare. I just felt the way that I had my list. If I were to put an enhancement, I'd have to lose a bigger unit
Mm-hmm.
than I would like to lose.
Okay.
So I built my list, like I said, as MSU. So I had a total of 17 units, and then if I unattached my characters, I could have 19.
Mm-hmm.
And like I said, I play very aggressively, and then I also like to bait my opponent into taking certain models or units that I have just sitting in the middle of the table, or they seem out of position,
Mm-hmm.
to kind of capitalize on the fact that they become judged after killing those units.
Okay.
Because once they've done their job, there's no point in having them anymore,
Mm-hmm.
unless they're actual good hammers. And sometimes your opponent gets lucky, sometimes you don't. Dice can be fickle, where you just lose the unit you didn't expect to lose, spending that CP on the AOC, having using that CP for go to ground, having that 6-up invul, it's great until all you do is roll 2s and 3s, and then you just lose that unit that you did not expect to lose.
Yeah, that makes sense. You were telling me a little bit earlier that was something you experienced in one of the games at this event, right? Just
Oh, I
super
don't want to
poor
talk
dice
about it.
rolls.
Yeah.
We'll
Uh,
maybe save that for later, yeah. But okay, so I get the design here. It's really like you would prioritize having these bigger units, like instead of like cutting this out and getting some scrap points to get an enhancement, and you would much rather just take the extra body, the extra resource and trading piece in your list.
Correct. So pretty much I didn't really tailor my list for anything because I know that Guard and Eldar had just recently come out and became tournament legal.
Mm-hmm.
I don't feel like there was enough people who fully understood how to play the new Eldar or the new
Mm-hmm.
Bridgehead to capitalize on its playstyle. So I didn't think there was going to be an overwhelming amount of Eldar or Guard. I felt
Okay.
like there was going to be a lot more Space Marine bodies or less. So
Mm-hmm.
that's kind of what I tailored my list for. Um, so like the Warriors, like I said, I took the Highlash Rotary and the Auto Rifle just for the volume of shots at 611 ignoring cover.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just 12 shots at 611 can pick up scouts. It can pick up a decent amount of units or just light chaff. The Sagittars, I noticed that you like to take your missile launchers, and a lot of people also do the missile launchers.
Mm-hmm.
I prefer the High because yes, it can be swingy, but on the math, sustained D3 is great. And then I have a 66% chance of rolling equal damage to the rocket launcher
Mm-hmm.
or better.
Yeah.
But it doesn't feel good when you roll a 1 or 2 on damage, and then that Space Marine survives.
Yeah, I think that's what it is, right? It's there's some consistency. Like the math is there to support taking several high las beam cannons because it should average out if you're taking a large number. Like you have a higher chance of hitting a six.
Keyword should.
Should, yeah, and sometimes it does, and it feels so good. Like when you're just consistently dishing out like 3-4 damage through, and
When
like
you roll a
sometimes you get
double
sustained
6
D3.
in a
Oh
Mortarion.
yeah, oh my god, so like 6 into 6 into 6, so good. And then sometimes you get like you shoot once, you get like 6 shots coming out of one Sagittar, and then like to wound you get like 5 ones, and then they just
Oh yeah,
make
no.
one save.
So then I decided I was gonna take 6 mana Thunderkin. Like I said, I used to run a 6 man and a
Mm-hmm.
3 man, but the 6 man with the +1 a wound, or not +1 a wound, +1 a hit from the Iron Master, and then being able to heal vehicles,
Yeah.
I thought was a very good profile to have in the list because say I'm not running against vehicles, which I ran into quite a few.
Mm-hmm.
The Strength 5 AP2 Damage 2 is also a huge stat line against a lot of Space Marine bodies.
Mm-hmm.
So you're wounding most Space Marines, again, if they're double judged, wounding them on 2s, overwatching on 5s, and that 6 man can easily pick up a 5 man unit of Space Marines. And then on a good roll, you can pick up a 10 man or at least neuter it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what it was mainly used for this weekend. And I preferred over a 5 man of Terminators, which I also did take. But for an additional 10 points, I get an additional 8 wounds. I get AP, I get damage, I get strength, I get an Overwatch threat, and I get anti-vehicle. I get a lot of good stuff for just an additional 10 points.
Interesting. Okay, so this is the second question I have for you around the Thunderkin. So, I love the Thunderkin on paper, and I've said this in a couple different videos. Like I think that they're great in terms of like that ideal stat line. AP2 is like so good, so spicy. You know, you wound Marines on 2s like you said because you're strength 5. You have blast, nice solid Overwatch threat as well. But I've found that they have a few problems in practice. And like to be fair, I didn't really test them extensively, but I kind of just got them on the table a couple times, and it's like I don't really like how this feels, and it was really around the limited range. So like pretty easy to just like pre-measure like the actual damage capabilities of the Thunderkin, like where could they land, where could they come in from, and I found it was the inability to ignore cover that was also a big problem for me with them because now suddenly it's like you're AP2, but usually you'll be going down to AP1, and then if there's armor contempt or something, for example, suddenly you're AP0, and you know AP0 not super great. So I'm really curious to hear how you use these effectively. in your list because I love them on paper, and I do agree with you that I think generally they probably outperform Hearthguard in a vacuum. Because I've always been a little disappointed with like the Hearthguard coming down from Deep Strike, like a little 5-man squad. They don't really have as much punch as something disembarking from a land fortress, but sometimes you just really need like to be somewhere else on the table. And if there is like a good alternative for that, like you said, for just 10 points more, like it does sound very tempting. Getting extra wounds, getting well relatively the same toughness, worse save, and more shots, and like the Terran for overwatching. So I think that could be pretty cool. I really struggle to effectively find a use for them in my list. How would you say you use this best? Like, what is the best use for a 6-man Thunderkin unit?
So most times, what I would do with this unit, there's only one time that I did not, but every for 7 out of my 8 games, what I would do is I would put the same thing in reserves. I would put an empty land fortress. I put a 5 mana Terminators in Deep Strike and a 6 mana Thunderkin led by an Iron Master in reserves as well.
Mm-hmm.
And they would walk on from a table edge, and it would be they'd walk on, they would shoot whatever they needed to shoot, which is just the main thing I need gone. And the Thunderkin are really good at just picking that one thing that needs to just disappear from the table, and it's gone. Regardless of what it is, unless it's a really tough like bug. Outside of that, it kills just about anything in the game.
Okay.
And with walking on, you can position yourself to pretty much not allow them to have cover. So if they do want to use AOC, they have to AOC against a volume of AP1 damage too. In
Mm-hmm.
Space Marines, which is the main one that has access to the AOC, um, they don't like damage too, and they're probably not going to risk it regardless.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Actually, I ran into a 10-man brick that had Stern Guard with the 4 Binvol and Dark Angels, and between cover and AOC, they wanted to make sure that my AP 2 went down to 0, and they still did not manage to survive the volume of shots I threw at them because it was 66 blast, so
Yeah.
66 plus 24 with AP2 down to 0, and then sustain hits 2. It just picks up whatever it wants to delete. And
Okay.
then it's in the
Okay.
position to be able to pick up another unit or model after the fact.
Mm-hmm.
And having the Iron Master with it, it makes me feel comfortable being able to charge it into a vehicle
Okay.
with the Graviton Hammer, and then that strat for +1 AP for each judgment on it. So now
Yes.
my melee is 4/2/2
Mm-hmm.
with +1 a wound or +1 a hit. So actually, I think the unit is very, very plausible.
Mm-hmm.
And like I said, I just walk it on. The one game I did not walk it on was into trying to think was into tactical orcs. I staged them in a U,
Okay.
one of the U's, so they would just sit there and challenge one of two objectives. So when the orcs did their WA turn, took their initial push to try and push me off objectives, they walked out from beyond that wall, which was measured to be within 18 inches.
Mm-hmm.
So I would be able to pick off whatever units I wanted. So, like I said, the 6 mana Thunderkin can pick up a 10 mana Flash Gits pretty easily because that T5 wounding on threes,
Mm-hmm.
hitting on threes, that stealth, we ignore it because the +1 to hit, +1 to hit.
Yeah.
Um, like I said, I just feel like Thunderkin are just looked at too much as anti-vehicle, and if they're not playing vehicle, it's not worth it. But
Mm-hmm.
that Strength 5 AP2 damage 2 is huge.
It absolutely is. Like you're totally right. I think so. Actually, I have a follow up question. What terrain format were you guys using at Cherokee? Was it WTC or was it GW?
It was GW layouts. Day 1 was layout 1, day 2 was layout 3, and then day 3 was layout 2.
Okay, okay, I see. That probably makes a better use case for them on GW versus something like super dense, right? Like on like WTC, where it's a little bit tougher to get in on the side angles. Maybe that explains why I haven't had much luck with them. At our store, we pretty much exclusively have been playing on WTC, and I'm like, there's just no angle for these guys to walk on effectively and shoot something. But I think on GW, I could definitely see a use case for this, especially how you described it. It almost sounds like you're quite aggressive with them as well, even looking for charge opportunities to get a little bit more value out of them instead of just having them stuck somewhere on the table after they land in.
But yeah, no, with our stat line of just toughness alone, Space Marines specifically, a lot of Strength 4 melee weapons have an issue wounding. Even something as simple as Hearthkin Warriors. That T5 is just a break point for a lot of Space Marine or just in general light shooting weapons.
Hmm.
That it's difficult for them to wound. And then with that 6-up Feel No Pain, that cover, or that ability to void armor, or even just a 4-up invul from the Sergeant, you tend to tank a lot more than your opponent thinks. So they end up having to allocate more resources to kill that 50-point unit
Hmm.
than they actually realize.
Makes sense. Okay. And I guess my last question on the Thunderkin, would you ever consider running them without a character attached, or do you think this is essential as part of the package for these guys?
So I don't necessarily consider it essential for the package,
Hmm.
because for what it does, um, it just gives it the +1 to hit. I've never been in a situation where the Iron Master has healed a Thunderkin.
Okay.
Um, so you could run this list easily without the Iron Master leading Thunderkin and just having it off to the side, healing vehicles, following the land forts around.
Hmm.
But the additional wounds and the ability to take damage on ECOGs and the Iron Assistant before taking it on Thunderkin,
Yeah.
I think is the best reason why you take it with the Thunderkin.
Hmm.
Because if they shoot a lot of damage 3 weapons or las cannons at the Thunderkin, you can just say, cool, I don't want an ECOG because I don't need it.
Yeah.
And nothing feels worse for your opponent than they're saying, oh, I can take half of that unit away and I don't have to worry about an Overwatch threat, but they only killed 3 1 wound models.
Yeah, yeah, you got like so many ablative wounds you could just pass things off to. That is probably the best selling point for if you do want to attach something to the Thunderkin. Like the whole reason would be just to soak that. Like even when they come in and you get overwatched, for example, right against some armies, like on average, most units overwatching this are going to pick up just like the 3 or 4 ECOG models and the assistant, not actually touching the squad itself, which is a huge selling point for sure. Because then you get all your full
Especially
firepower.
when you put the ECOGs behind cover and
Mm.
now you're taking saves on the ECOGs and they're like, wow, this is not dying. Why is it not dying? Surprise, it's a little robot.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Cool. I like that. I think you're gonna make me try Thunderkin out, which I don't know if I like that, but you're getting me excited for them, which is rare. So I might have to test this after I get back from the event. Okay. And then there was another question that I had. This one came from one of our channel members regarding the Berserks. They want to know how you feel about Plasma Axe Berserks and why you have not joined the School of Plasma Axes yet.
So Votan does extremely well with damage to weapons. If you look at all of the weapons that we have in my list,
Mm-hmm.
you have the Hearthkin Pioneers with the 9 shots at 712, ignoring cover. You have the Hecaton Land Fortresses, each with 12 shots at 612 or 712.
Mm-hmm.
You have the Thunderkin that are 2 damage apiece. You have the Sagittars with the Bolt Cannons at 2 damage apiece. You have the Warriors with volume of 1 damage. I feel like there's a lot of 2 damage already in the list.
Mm-hmm.
I felt like I wanted to make sure I had enough to kill, say, I go into Terminators of any sort or degree, or anything with -1 damage, because I didn't want to go into Death Company where they have Lamardis with a -1 damage
For
and
sure.
just not do enough.
Mm-hmm.
So I felt it would be best to have the 3 units of hammers for those matchups where it's cool, you're on your invul, every fail's a dead Terminator.
Yeah.
Especially into things like Dark Angels. I played into the Deathwing Knights with their innate -1 damage,
Mm-hmm.
and having a volume of damage 2. I definitely needed that damage 3 because even my land forts with their conversion beamers were not killing a Deathwing Knight with 1 shot
Yeah.
from the conversion beamer.
Yeah. 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 Okay.
So just having that flexibility, like I said, I like my list to have a lot of flexibility. That way, every game that I play is not only a challenge, but also has the ability to handle just about any threat that I could go into.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah.
like it's plus also going into Imperial Knights, just the AP2 damage 3, pumping it up to AP4 where they don't get a save. Where it's just like, cool, you failed 5 out of the 8 saves I gave you,
Mm-hmm.
or it's just 5 saves you don't get to make saves on. Go ahead and take 15 damage, and you're going to
Yeah.
bring a big knight down to a lower number, or you're going to kill a small knight without even breaking a sweat. And considering this is a 100-point unit, that's that's kind of big. They trade up for their points very well.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So first of all, completely agree with you. I understand the thought process here. I think especially in the way you designed your list, you do have easy access to damage to everywhere. And just like as a whole for Votan, damage 3 is actually pretty tough to come by. Like outside of the the Hesir inside the Hearthguard, right, with the hammer. Like, I don't even think there is any other damage 3 inside of our roster outside of that and then the Berserks. So having damage 3 always very powerful. Like you said, it's just like so many profiles in the game have 3 wounds, and this is just like your very clear cut answer to dealing with that problem is send the Berserks in. And I agree with you completely that they punch up really, really well, especially to something like Knights that doesn't have an invuln in melee. You bump up their EP, and now suddenly it just takes 4 unsaved wounds, and the model dies, which is pretty powerful for, like you said, a 100-point unit. So very good at trading, and I think just supporting that play style that you're looking for here that you mentioned a little bit earlier in the video, where everything's kind of pulling its weight, everything allows you, it's like a toolbox, and you got all the tools for any job you might need built into this list. So I think that makes a lot more sense, and hopefully that answers Jordan's question in chat. Okay, and then we have so little 5-man Iron Your Hearthguard unit. You had said, maybe I misheard, but I think you had said you were considering dropping this for more Thunderkin in the future. Was that correct?
So that's actually the opposite. So I dropped 3 Thunderkin to pick up. So I dropped 3 Thunderkin and an enhancement. Um, and there was a couple other tweaks that I made in the list, but I was running 3 Thunderkin, another Sagitar, and the Appraising Glare
Okay, okay.
prior. But then I ended up taking the Hearthguard instead because I wanted that also a little bit more chaff clearing just for the
Mm-hmm.
light chaff, that ability for that light punching, and then also a deep strike threat.
Mm-hmm.
Because when you don't have a single deep strike threat, they don't feel the need to screen out the center of the board. They focus on the edges of the board, and then you're not going to be able to walk on where you want to.
Yeah.
So having that deep strike threat makes them have to spread themselves a little thin, being able to screen out everything. Because just because it's a 5-man does not mean it doesn't shoot well.
Mm-hmm.
The 15 shots, also, if I decide to use the strat for double sustains, 15 shots hitting on 2s with devastating wounds is also huge. And then say I do need the access to the rerolls. Nothing is stopping me from deep striking next to a land fort. Following turn, hop in. Final turn, hop out, pick up
Mm-hmm.
whatever I need to.
Yeah.
Um, it's just a good flexibility piece. It's just a deep strike threat, so they're also always screening out their backfield. They don't just leave it on turn 2, continue screening on turn 3.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it forces your opponent to actually think of all possible outcomes and not just the same reason why custodians take graph tanks. It makes your opponent respect your ability to move.
Mm-hmm. That makes a lot of sense. Okay. So I think that's all the questions I had here on your list. I think everything else makes a lot of sense, self-explanatory for the loadout choices. And I guess we're good to talk a little bit more. I see you named the list Angry Taxi 2 Revenge of the Dwarf. Was there an Angry Taxi 1?
No, I just thought Angry Taxi 2 would be a whole lot more funny than just Angry Taxi 1.
Yeah. Okay, good. I mean, that's what caught my eye, so it worked. Okay, cool. So I guess we could talk a little bit about the event itself now, and maybe you could walk us through the matchups.
All right, so let me go ahead and pull up my tabletop battles where I scored all my games,
Sure.
and then it'll help me jog my memory on some of these games because, like you said, it was a lot of different games to
Yeah,
try
yeah,
and remember every detail.
absolutely.
But so starting with match 1, I played against Tactical Orcs, which if you have not played against Tactical Orcs, you know that they have access to orders and they can give themselves stealth and benefit of cover.
Mm-hmm.
Considering the fact that we hit on 4s, and if it's not a judged unit, we're hitting on 5s.
Mm-hmm.
It's a pretty big issue. So you definitely have to play a lot more aggressive in that matchup and rely on your ability to pick them off with volume, because they also have bad saves just like we do.
Mm-hmm.
So you just kind of you got to capitalize on that. Make sure you have plenty of walls and screening, so when they do wah, it's either lackluster, so they have to charge into something light like Jaegers, Spikes, Warriors. Um, that matchup, I started off with some pretty bad secondaries, but in turn, so did they. So honestly, I just stayed in the game the entire time. So they had to call a turn 3 wah because they spent too much time trying to kill Jaegers and Bikes.
Mm-hmm.
That T6 was definitely a stat check for them
Nice.
to be able to push through, and then their horrible ballistic skill
Yeah.
did not help them at all.
Yeah.
Um, Game 2 was the game that was horrible.
Yeah.
I lost to Death Guard. First game I won 82-51.
Okay.
The next game I ended up losing to Death Guard. It was Plague Company and they took -1 weapon skill. It was a double Brigand, Carnivore, double Rhino, 10-man Berserk, or not 10-man Berserkers, 10-man Plague Marines,
Mm-hmm.
Mortarion, the works.
Nice.
Not a single Terminator, but they had a lot of higher toughness,
Mm-hmm.
and they were very aggressive. They were able to get in my face. They kept the things that I had judged back, so the initial judgments did not matter.
Mm-hmm.
So pretty much the entire game I was hitting on fives and or sixes due to the fact of minus weapon
Brutal.
skill and stealth or smoke.
Yeah.
Being able to smoke a predator and then stealth another unit and then also have Morty's aura for stealth
Mm-hmm.
was pretty bad. So that game felt very unwinnable. I feel like if I had gone first, it would have been a different game.
Mm-hmm.
However, dice are fickle.
Dice are
Ended up
fickle, yeah. And I think especially if you're hitting on fives and sixes, then it becomes even more fickle.
ended up losing that game 61-93.
Mm-hmm.
Like you said, Votan tends to win or lose by a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
I tend to play a lot more aggressive, so those margins are much larger.
Okay.
The next game I had played against Eldari Warhost, a lot of T3 one wound bodies. I was just kept pushing him off the objective, so he wasn't able to score as much primary as he needed to. It was also Purge the Foe, so we both played a little cagey throughout the game.
Nice.
Again, the Thunderkin came in. They were able to pick off the fire dragons, so they weren't able to pick up my vehicles, which was kind of big for me. I managed to do that on turn 3.
Nice.
So I was able to be a lot more aggressive with my land fortresses and Sagitars as
Mm-hmm.
time went on. Game 4, so day 1, I ended up 2-1. Eldari, I won 89-73.
Nice. Okay.
The next day,
So just before you get ahead onto day two, I'll
yep,
just quickly recap something here on because I think you mentioned some pretty important points. We didn't have time to really talk about them, but I think we're good on time, so maybe we could just quickly say these ones. So for orcs, it sounds like you had to kind of adjust your playstyles. What I'm understanding from a lot of these games, in terms of like how aggressive you might have been early on, or how responsive you were to certain threats that were put forward, and kind of just like identifying what items in your opponent's list were the things that needed to be dealt with first to provide you with the smoothest experience later in the game. I think you had mentioned that with Hildari as well, like picking up targets that would impact like your halls, and then once those targets were gone, you were able to pretty much just roam freely on the table with your bigger threats. And I think that's a pretty good skill to have, just kind of picking up on like what the game plan is, like what the win condition looks like, knowing if you need to be aggressive like that too. Mentioning that with orcs, for example, if you let the game go on for a while, eventually, like yeah, they have bad saves, they have bad BS too, but if they just give themselves layers of buffs defensively, then the same thing happens to you in a lot of cases, and it becomes a lot more of an even trading game. And the win path looked like just having really aggressive pushes early in the game to try to neutralize the later game stalling that the orc player might have been able to have on you, which in turn might have led to a tighter game. So I think that's a really good skill to have, that you were able to pick up on like what actually needed to happen to make your list succeed and to make the army succeed inside of each one of these matchups in the environment. So pretty well done, man.
yeah, so 100% I like that's exactly what it is figure out what the weakness of your list is. Mine is the fact that I rely heavily on my vehicles to be able to be those threats, in addition to moving up my own threats or my own skirmish or counterplays,
Mm-hmm.
and handling what would handle mine. So getting rid of the Breaker Boys, the Tank Busters, those were kind of my number one goals. The flash kits were definitely an issue, not necessarily for my vehicles, but for all of my infantry coming out.
Mm-hmm.
Because those rerolls and the ability to just pick it up with volume is a huge problem. So I knew that the Breaker Boys and the Tank Busters were definitely the first ones that needed to go. But the biggest skill, in addition to identifying what the opponent threat is, what I would say is measuring your opponent's movement and their threat ranges more than you measure your own.
Okay.
Knowing your own is great, but if I know that my opponent cannot move this far or cannot go in this direction with regardless of any ability or strat they have, I know that is a threat I do not need to worry about for this turn.
Mm-hmm.
And then I also need to be able to measure outside the threat ranges of things that can be problems. So like this unit has advance in charge. Well, four of these units can advance in charge with a strat. What am I most comfortable losing? What is my backup plan to losing that unit? Um, what is my response if this happens? And
Okay.
if I don't have a response to X, Y, and Z, that's a problem that I should not have. I should not be doing it in the first place.
Yeah, nice. Well said. I agree. I think that makes a lot of sense. All right, so you move on from day one with your one defeat, a frustrating one, kind of unfair to have to hit on fives and sixes, a little bit out of your control, especially if it was basically decided on who gets first turn. And then you go into day two, and it looks like the first game you play is Death Guard again.
Yeah, that was not as fun, or it wasn't as bad. It was definitely a very good game, very great opponent. It was more the fact that day two I felt favored me quite a bit, especially like I said, me having the Thunderkin and the Land Fortress being able to walk on from a table edge.
Mm-hmm.
Um, in Search and Destroy, you can walk on from both table edges and be able to see into your opponent's deployment. Um, you can get lines however you want to with my ability to scout and move. I believe I went first in that game. Oh, actually, no, they went first. They came to me a lot quicker, so they didn't have cover. They didn't have the ability to stop me from walking on where I wanted to. So
Mm-hmm.
they came to me, which made the ability to which the our issue is range. So
Mm-hmm.
them coming to us makes it 10 times easier, not having to worry about am I close enough? Are they
Yeah.
out of my range? Will I only get 3 or 4 guys in? Them walking in made things a whole lot easier for me to not worry about range, be able to allocate threats.
Mm-hmm.
I scored on one side of the board and then contested the middle. Then I put a lot of big threats on the other side of the board, which they then allocated Mortarion and their 6 mana Death Shroud to. Um, I managed to stall the 6 man and Mortarion long enough to kill Mortarion, and the Death Shroud were just stuck on the other side of the board, allowing me to score primary uncontested on the other side.
Nice.
Um, I ended up winning that game only because of a secret mission.
Okay.
I took my Hammer Champion, who was my Warlord. I dropped him in the backfield where they played too aggressively, so all they had back there was Tallyman. I got my Warlord on their home objective, killed Tallyman, got more OC than the Plague Burst Crawler that they allocated back there.
Mm-hmm.
That only came down to the fact that I was able to get a secret mission off. Otherwise, I probably would have lost the game by maybe 8 points.
Okay. Okay. So it sounds like Death Guard generally, or I suppose things that are generally tougher to crack, and in response also make it a lot harder for you to connect your shots to, being Death Guard, of course, would be like a decent, not necessarily a counter to Voltan or your list, but one of the more challenging matchups.
Yeah, that's one of the few matchups where I wish that I had taken more Hearthguard
Mm-hmm.
with their ability for volume to take advantage of their 3-up saves.
Mm-hmm.
And then the ability to hit on twos with the being outside of their contagion, be able to
Yeah.
throw volume at them, having those deep strike threats, and worst case scenario, now you're hitting on threes in melee. Worst case again with strats and you're up close, fours and shooting.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, Worst case 44 or worst case hitting on fours for that 50-50 is pretty good. Hitting on sixes, not so much.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
So you get the solid win here, 8 point victory, pretty good. And then that brings you into round five versus World Eaters.
So World Eaters, it was definitely a coin flip of who came first. Like I said, I played very
Mm,
aggressively. My Jaegers are there for screening. So if they do go first, that can soften the blow a little bit.
mm-hmm.
But it was more the fact that I lined up on the line. I was able to scout 6 with my Sagittar, disembark Berserkers 3, move them another 5, and charge into their deployment and pick up a 6 mana of 8 bound.
Wow,
Uh,
nice.
6 mana of Exalted with the Berserkers, and which were double judged. The land fort moving up 10 inches. This other two Sagittars scouting 6, moving 12, getting lines of what they needed to. Um, Scouting bikes up, shooting something, and then charging the Rhino, in which I boxed in. So the Mo brick was unable to disembark because you're unable to
Mm-hmm.
disembark if you can't disembark wholly within 3.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I trapped it against the board edge, and then the other 3 sides of the Rhino were cornered by bikes. So I was able to keep a hammer threat out of my way for about 3 turns until eventually the Lord Invocatus killed the bikes just enough to allow the Mobrick to disembark.
Mm-hmm.
But by that time, it was a little too late. Um, Angron coming back was a big problem. I killed him first in shooting with 2 land forts, 2 Sagittars, and a grenade.
Okay.
And then he came back and was immediately met with. He flipped the land fortress, which had 5 Berserkers in it. He was then charged the following turn by 5 Terminators, 5 Berserkers, and another 2 Berserkers.
Mm-hmm.
So Angron didn't last much longer after that. But no, I pretty much played a very Monk Ka similar like style. I
Yeah,
had to be in
yeah.
his face before he can get into mine, since a lot of their benefits come from charging.
Mm-hmm.
So just keeping their strength down, keeping their number of attacks down is kind of a huge problem for them.
Yeah,
So I managed to get the win off of that one. I managed to score 100 points to their 48.
nice.
Another great opponent, very friendly guy. Played a very good game.
Nice. No, that sounds incredible. I think the play turn one with the scouting and then immediately disembark and charge turn one into their DZ definitely probably caught the world leaders player off guard because he just basically took his game and threw it back at him and said, "Okay, here, deal with this." And dude, oh my god, to pick up 6 exalted turn one is so nice. That's just like
Oh
a
no, he was
complete weight
very,
off your shoulders.
very thrown off guard because he didn't have the CP to -1 damage.
Mm.
So just putting them in that position to lose that 300 and I think 310 point, 320 point unit,
Mm-hmm.
um, off the rip to a 100 point Berserker squad that immediately dies on the
Yeah.
clapback on the following turn. Um, was definitely not what he expected. He even told me after the fact, he's like, I did not expect you to do that at all.
Yeah.
That completely paid off. You deployed very aggressively. I feel like this would have been a different game if I had gone first, and I agreed. I was like, I would have lost half my army if you went first.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Granted, I probably would have scouted bikes up, formed walls sideways to
Yeah.
force him to charge into 2 layers
Yeah.
rather than just the one. But definitely was a risk that I took that I knew that I had to take.
Yeah. No, I think that definitely paid out massively for you. I am also a big advocate. So first of all, I love playing the world leader matchup. I think it's always a very fun game, and like you said, I think the best strategy is always deploy on the line because like they are going to charge you no matter what you do. The world leader player will get to you, but you could determine what they hit and how hard you get to hit them back, which is very powerful if you do that well. And in your case, you actually just completely reversed it and did one further. You actually went to attack them in their lines and try to pin them there. And then like pinning something in their backfield that has to stay and deal with berserks, tying up a rhino and just stalling like 2 turns on whatever's inside that can't disembark. Like that wins you the game, right? Like just dealing with resources and keeping them away from the middle of the table, away from objectives. That's how you win. So really well done, super creative play with the turn one like charge into their DZ. Pretty nice.
The following game was against Tyranids, and Tyranids is one of those few matchups that I would consider not the greatest,
Okay.
due to the fact of the -1 leadership,
Mm-hmm.
the um, consistent battle shocks, the ability to do the shot on the warp, just deny you primary, deny you secondary. It's not fun when they do pop that shot on the warp.
No.
Um, but the list that they played, they didn't really have any chaff. So it was just very big monsters, and they took fixed, which you would think in a competitive setting, wow, this doesn't make sense. when you watch this person play, you would definitely look at it and go, "Yep, that makes sense."
Okay.
Because it was a Norn that had to walk to this corner that was also touching the objective they chose. That means I do not die. Deal with it however you may. And then
Yeah.
it was Tyrannifex and an Exocrine coming off to this side. Deal with it however you may. And then a Biovore in the back line shooting Spore Mines wherever it wants to go because they
Mm-hmm.
did take behind enemy lines and engage on all fronts.
Nice.
So
Okay.
the moment they get behind enemy lines, it's only 3 points out of the four,
Mm-hmm.
but you still score 3 points every time you shoot a Spore Mine back there.
Yeah.
So pretty much he made me decide either stay on my back line and deny him 3 points of secondary and don't score any of your own points, or play aggressively and just hope that you managed to kill what you needed to kill.
Okay, I see. That's a pretty interesting list.
It was definitely a very, very interesting list. It was a total stat check. Everything was T11 or higher. 2 up, 3 up saves. Just high damage. The rupture cannons being able to pick up land forts and Sagittars every
Mm-hmm.
turn was pretty bad. So I knew I had to remove the Biovord immediately, which was done on turn 3. So he didn't score any more of his behind enemy lines throughout the rest of the game.
Mm-hmm.
And then I got rid of the Tyrannifexes as soon as I could, or tried to at least, tying them up, making them -1 to hit,
Mm-hmm.
trying to allow my Stars to stay alive just a little bit longer. But that came down very close, and it came down to neither of us had any more time.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So it was an 80 to 78 point win.
Nice. Okay. Pretty close. Yeah.
So I was cutting it very, very close.
Okay.
So that was day 2. So like I said, the search and destroy layout was just very beneficial
Mm-hmm.
to my list and how I play. So I managed to win day 2 3-0,
Nice.
putting my total score to 5-1.
Okay. Was it search and destroy for each one of the games on day two?
Correct. So
Okay.
day 1 was linchpin layout 1.
Mm-hmm.
Day 2 was layout 3 search and destroy.
Nice. Okay. Yeah, I love search and destroy, man. So nice. So nice for an army that has so much scout. You just
Oh
get to
yeah, no,
go so far.
I play very aggressively with my scout moves
Mm-hmm.
and my turn 1 plays, so I'm able to get aggressive footholds, so
Mm-hmm.
I'm able to walk on where I want to, when I want to,
Yeah.
because nothing feels worse being told that you can't walk into no man's land
Mm-hmm.
because your opponent screened better than you did.
Mm-hmm.
Going into day 3, uh, game 1 off the rip, I was very excited because I was playing against Space Marines, which is the first Space Marine that I played this entire event.
Nice.
I was so very
Okay.
excited because it was 2 wound bodies. I'm gonna have a good time until I found out it was Ultramarine Vanguard. So again, outside of range, you're -1 to hit.
Yeah. Yeah.
And Vanguard does not say I have stealth, so your bikes don't benefit from it. It just means you're -1 to hit, and then you just sit there and cry.
Vanguard is a really
Um,
tough matchup. I've found in the games I've played versus it, it's very difficult. They get to do a lot of things that are glaring weaknesses for us, like you said, like -1 that you can't counter, and the ability to just like lift things up and go to a different objective once they've committed to one side of the table. Also tough to deal with, depending on what you're running. So yeah, I
Also, with their
definitely
ability for +1
sympathize.
AP,
Yeah, +1 AP as well. I
+1
definitely
AP,
sympathize.
+1 wound because they're Ultramarines, rerolling hits. Plasma Inceptors, 3 Plasma Inceptors, I learned, will pick up a land fortress in 1 round of shooting.
Nasty. Just absolutely
It
nasty.
was it was insane to me. Um, it was trying to think, and only 2 of them died uh, to hazardous, and that's again what was insane to me is they had hit with everything, they wounded with everything, and they're like, cool, I'm AP4 by the way, deal with it, and my land
Jeez.
fortress just died. I was
Yeah.
like, roll as any A6 and you'll be fine, and just I couldn't.
Yeah. Space Marines was so I think I started telling you this before we got on the recording. But like the list I was playing for like the better half of a year was triple Landford, and I played like only 2 or 3 games into the new like the new patch that has like the upgraded Space Marines and everything, like the Grotmus detachments. And it was versus Space Marines where I started my existential crisis of like I can't play this list anymore because the land forts just get popped by Marines. Like they just get popped, man. And even like you just said, right? Like three plasmas picked up a land fort because they're AP4, just re-rolling all their hit rolls, re-rolling their wound rolls, damage three flat. It's just crazy, man. It's so easy to pick up like big models against Space Marines. If you're playing Space Marines, I should say. So,
I will say I was very excited because this weekend I killed a total of 6 Primarchs.
oh my god,
Um,
nice.
I killed Gilliman twice. I killed Mortarion twice in 2 separate games, and then I killed Angron twice. So I was very happy I was able to do that.
A very prosperous weekend for the dwarves. They
We're
got to
just
face the
ankle biters
hardest
on
guys.
those ankle biters is what we are.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So I cut ahead a little bit here. So how did this game go for you against the Ultramarines?
So they were able to also get in my deployment very quickly. I didn't want to push too much out because of the Calgar brick being able to advance and charge.
Mm-hmm.
I tried to screen out, but it got picked up very quickly. It just felt like that match went from very plausible to not, because he took a lot of risks on his turn too, and they played out very well for him.
Mm-hmm.
He managed to get he managed to get Gilliman up, make a 9-inch charge into my Berserkers. He advanced and charged Calgar.
Brutal.
He got a really good advance on Calgar's squad. He ran Calgar with Blade Guard veterans. So it was also just an issue because he was able to reroll saves of one, while also having a 4 pinball. So it's only 2 and 3s failed.
Mm-hmm.
He made an ungodly amount of 4 Pains on Calgar against my Terminator squad, or not my Terminator squad, my Berserkers.
Mm-hmm.
Because I ran 2 units of 5 Berserkers at Calgar squad. And I killed all the Blade Guard vets. I brought him down to 1 Ventress Guard, and then he took the wounds on Calgar because Calgar still has a 4-up Feel No Pain whenever he's leading the Ventress Guard.
Yeah.
And he survived until 2. And there was just 2 wounds stuck there for 2 turns, and I was not happy with it.
Brutal. Brutal.
He followed it up with all 3 units of Inceptors dropping down in about the same zone, picking up warriors. He was able to pick up my land fortress. He managed to pick up a Sagittar, which Berserkers popped out, and that's what Gilliman ended up charging. And then he was pretty much in my deployment on turn 2, which I would
My
expect that from
god.
Gladius or
Mm-hmm.
Stormlance, but I did not expect that from Vanguard. Uh, the ability to, oh yeah, and the Desolators. He's running 2 units of
Yeah,
Desolators.
that's the thing I was gonna
So,
comment on.
because you would think, oh, it's strength 5, strength 6, strength 7. You don't have to worry about it, but it adds up very quickly, especially with their ignore cover.
Yeah,
It can pop a Sagittar. Did not expect that
that's
because it hits on
crazy.
4s, but if he oath the moments it, he's full hit rerolls. He doesn't really care.
That's crazy. Like you don't even think about that, but you're right. It just like the amount of like consistency you get out of something, even indirectly, because of the reroll hits +1 to wound, is just absolutely brutal. And you get to put it on like you oath 2 things, and you got 2 desolation squads. You'll lose 2 things indirectly each turn. It's nuts.
I thought I'd be able to last a little bit longer, because my T5, but T5 didn't matter. Um, Again, they're strength 5 +1 wound, so they have the same thing we do with that judgment,
Yeah,
is being equal strength to something, but +1 wound is huge, because that's just an increase of probability of you killing it.
yeah.
The only time that it felt nice having that T5 was JPI not being able to pick up warriors.
Mm-hmm. Really?
Uh, yeah, that strength 4 wounding on 5s was not great. So each time the JPI charged me, they did maybe 1 or 2 mortals. I'd make a 6-up Feel No Pain on one of them. And then my sergeant would just tank it all. I just roll 4-up invulns each time.
Nice, nice.
Those sergeants, those 4-up invulns have survived a lot. Like they've survived Scarbrand. He did his attacks into a 5-mana warriors, thought he'd pick it up. It won
Yeah.
me a game at the last GT I went to before Cherokee. He was just unable to pick off OC on that objective. which denied him points and picked up more points for me the following turn.
Dude, every now and then he makes those saves, and when he does, it's actually game changing. And it's funny
Oh no,
because
he is Uthar's successor.
yeah, 100%. You got to make him a named Thane now. I remember I played him into just like a standard warrior squad. I had it into the what's that new core detachment that came out with Grotmus, like the one where they get to all surge reactive move into you. And I had just like my 5-man warrior stand. It was on purge. I sent 5 warriors out standing on an objective. The guy sends his dogs out, full squad. They can't get through the one warrior with the 4-up invuln. And then on my turn, I get like the points on purge because I just get to walk up and kill it with something else. So funny. So every now and then, it's rare that it happens, but sometimes you get super lucky. It just spikes, and it could easily win you a game. You're playing Custodes all of a sudden.
Oh yeah, no, it's like I said, we both played Custodes before, so we're practicing those 4-up invos
Yeah,
before we even started playing
yeah.
Votann.
There you go. It's all dice skill, eh?
Ironically, going into this event, I was most worried about Purge the Foe,
Mm.
because I had 17 units, and other
Hmm.
people had maybe like 10 to 13, maybe 14 if they're on
Okay.
a higher amount of units.
Yeah.
So I was worried about losing more units than they would on the following turn. Um, which ironically, I won both my Purge the Foe games because they decided to put Purge the Foe in there twice.
Nice. Okay. Which games were on purge? Out of curiosity.
So the one against Eldar was Purge the Foe.
Okay.
And then the last game, which I was about to mention, was against Dark Angels playing Purge the Foe, which
Okay.
that was in addition to Tyranids, this was the closest game that I had that came down to 100 to 98.
Oh my God. Okay. Tell us about this one.
So the entire game pretty much came to me holding and holding more, and him killing and killing more because he had tougher units than I did,
Mm-hmm.
and I had twice as many units as he did. So
Yeah.
pretty much every turn he got hold and then kill one, kill more, and I got hold more, kill one, until the final turn when I was able to deny him the hold more and kill more, and I got hold more and kill more, and that's the only
Crazy.
reason why I won that game.
Crazy game. 100 to 98 is just absolutely insanity.
Oh, I was so nervous. I was shaking. I was showing him the phone. He's like, "What?" He's like, "What are my secondaries?" I'm like, "These are your secondaries. No prisoners and recover assets." Um, or it was no prisoners and defend stronghold. And he's like, "Okay, so what do I got to do?" Um, so I was like, "You have to either take this and hold this, or you have to kill this. You can't do both." And he's like, well, if I do this and kill this, which was my Sagittar,
Mm.
with I think 2 ICC left, he wins the game. I
Oh
said,
my
well, you
God.
could do that. If you kill that, you'll control it. There's nothing I can do about it, but I don't think you'll be able to kill it because I have Void Armor, and I do have the ability to reroll for a command reroll.
Mm.
And T10 is a little bit of a stat check to get through.
Mm-hmm.
And that's honestly why Sagittars survive as long as they do.
Yeah.
So he went for it. He took the risk to get the win instead of a potential tie, or and he just didn't.
Mm-hmm.
I survived. He did not. I went down to I think 1 or 2 wounds, and he just couldn't get it. It came down to a Sagittar surviving to deny him the hold more at the end of the game and the kill more at the end of the game to secure a 198 point victory.
That is wild. See, I think games like this just make the whole experience so much better of going
Oh
with
yeah,
us.
no, because it was also really cool, dude. So we're laughing, we're both panicking, we're celebrating whenever we make a save.
Yeah.
We're both like we're laughing and joking about the entire game, but we're over here like the back of our head, like crap, 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 crap.
Yeah. I hope it's him. I hope he whiffs.
Survive, and he does not survive.
Yeah, that's crazy. Okay, I'm looking at his list now. So yeah, he had like 2 squads of Deathwing Knights. He had the Inner Circle Companions. Oh, this is the big Stern Guard brick. Okay. Yeah, nice man. Okay. So how did you find your army did into something a little stat checky like this? Like this is, I guess, what you were saying was one of your fears for Purge, right? Being unable to keep up with the kill rate. But I guess it sounds like on the other end, you have so many things, so you give up kill more, but you have a much easier time getting hold and hold more, which I guess just balances out.
Exactly. So the issue that, like I said, the issue that I was worried about was not being able to kill him more than he did.
Mm-hmm.
I threw a unit of Berserkers, and then I shot two Sagittars, two Land Fortresses, at a unit of Deathwing Knights, and was still unable to get through it all.
Mm.
Between the -1 damage, rolling twos on my high las, or them being able to just make their saves on my conversion beams, it just felt bad. Because access to AOC just put him on the 3-up saves, and it just wasn't great for me.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so yeah, the Deathwing Knights being able to have those Berserkers go in there and at least whittle some wounds off, and with their 5-up Feel No Pains, being able to spike on them and keep them in combat for another turn was great. But at the same time, this was Stormlance, so they're able to advance in charge and fall back in charge innately.
Okay, I see.
So locking them in combat's not really a thing. But no, the Deathwing Knights were definitely a stat check that I had an issue pushing through, and I felt like what was asked earlier, if I had taken axes, I definitely would have struggled a whole lot more.
Okay, yeah, yeah, that makes sense. I had a game recently into Dark Angels, Librarius Conclave. I spoke a little bit about it on the channel in one of the recap videos for the tournament prep, and I was taken back by how durable Deathwing Knights are. It like I like okay, it's -1 damage, whatever, that's fine. But I put like 3 land forts in, and I still couldn't get through like half the squad. It was crazy. Like it messes with the math so much. -1 damage on something that's 4 wounds, especially with a land fortress. Now like every conversion shot doesn't kill anymore, so it just makes it super brutal. Then they get AOC, basically unkillable. You need to have multiple solid threats going in. And I guess that's where the Berserks are really nice because damage 3 goes to damage 2, and then you still just need 2 to go through to kill something versus the axes, which would go from damage 2 to damage 1, and then you would need 4 failed saves to actually connect. So I
Right.
get the logic there for sure. All right, so that wrapped up your run at the event, making you 6-2, top Votan player. You got the title of best in faction. That's a huge honor, man. Now you're like famous among the kin. Everybody's talking about you on the Discord. How do you feel?
Honestly, like I said, it came down to just a small amount of points to beat out the other two Votan players who also went 6-2.
Mm,
Very good players, very similar style or different, similar lists. The style I could tell you was different because I played next to Duncan, I think twice,
okay.
2 or 3 times. And he was the other Votan player that went 6-2 besides Junior. He ended up, like I said, same score, 6-2, but I would look over at his table and he would be finishing his game with a lot more units on the table.
Mm.
And I'm over here sitting with 1 land fort, 1 Sagittar, and a unit of warriors.
Yeah.
And he's like, I have 2 land forts, I have 3 Sagittars, several units just chilling in the middle of the board. I have my bikes still.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, bikes are just throwaway units at the very beginning, and if they survive, then they score me points.
Interesting.
Um,
Okay.
because they're just really fast. They're in their face. It forces them to move forward just a little bit, not as much as they want to, and kill the bikes,
Mm-hmm.
which in turn gives them judgment tokens, which in turn means that I kill them back.
Okay.
Um,
Okay. So what would you say in your list is like your big damage dealer, like your big punch? Like a lot of people will usually use, like you said, like they'll use the bikes, like the screen backfield the whole game, and then turns 3, 4, 5 try to score some secondaries behind enemy lines, things like that, or just then try to look for opportunities to use them on. Some people like running 6-man bike squads as like the big punch. It sounds like for you, like a lot of these units, a lot of these pieces, you use very aggressively to trade them early on, and you're trying to just stack tokens up. So, what's like your big punch unit when you do your go turn?
so trying to think. So normally how I play it is I'd keep 1 or 2 units of berserkers back inside a land fortress.
Mm-hmm.
So like turn 1, it's normally Jaegers come out, bikes come out, warriors disembark, and they're either scoring me points or if I'm worried about initial charges, they go out there, they throw themselves to be speed bumps.
Mm-hmm.
And that's 5 units that I throw out there to be speed bumps if they're a primarily melee army. because it just stops them out in the open. There's no way that they can consolidate backwards to cover or save themselves, and by that time it's turn two, um, which means that I can walk on reserves, I can deep strike reserves, I can make aggressive pushes and pick up whatever I need to. If they're primarily shooting armies, the Jaegers they end up moving forward. They normally advance, trying to force them to stay back. Bikes tend to stay back more. They tend to be like third turn, fourth turn, killing, scoring,
Mm-hmm.
picking up whatever's left. Um, and then Berserkers go out there and just take whatever they put in the middle of the board to kill said Jaegers or kill said bikes. And then they kill back, and that means that we've initiated the trading game. And if you
Mm-hmm.
play Votann, mastering the trading game, understanding the value of your opponent's pieces, and more so understanding the value of your pieces to the mission, the matchup, is going to be a big deciding factor of who wins that game.
Mm-hmm.
So, them needing to allocate JPI to kill my 5-man Berserkers, will it happen? Probably. Between the Impact Mortals, grenades, shooting, and then charges, they could pick up that unit. But knowing that JPI squad is primarily one of their scoring units, that they felt they could just pick up your Berserkers, cool. They traded up 10 points, but then they lose probably the 10 to 15 points overall that they're going to use that JPI unit for.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I think like especially with Voltan, like you mentioned at the beginning of the video, the army really does support like a trade war style gameplay, and I think it's to our own advantage. Like we play very midfield bullies. We try to get key resources out, and like you leverage the sheer amount of stuff that you have in a list that you could fit into a Voltan list. Like some lists could go up to like 22 activations for Voltan, like very easily too, and still have like a good amount of damage and a good amount of like staying power as well for like primary. So I think it's like you said, right? Like you're just kind of you're getting your opponent to trade pieces away, and eventually they'll run out of all their cheap stuff, and then all that's left is like things that they don't want to be wasting to do secondaries with, for example, or like they'll run out of pieces that have to come onto an objective, and then they'll start bringing things out that maybe they want to keep a little bit more reserved or defensively. So, like you said, just like understanding the value of your units, the role they need to play, and also your opponent's list, and then like kind of estimating how the trade's going to come out and like where the value is, like what a good trade looks like. Is like a super good skill to have, especially with this army. And I think the army is great at teaching it as well. So I've been having a lot of fun with that as well. It's good to see that you were able to leverage that in your games. I guess I have two questions at the end of all this. So, like, my first one would be: were there any matchups that you were hoping to dodge at this event? There's a lot of scary detachments out there, a lot of scary armies. Was there anything that you were hoping to avoid?
Uh, the main two were the Tyranids and Death Guard,
Mm-hmm.
which, funny enough, I played both of them.
Yeah.
And the matchups that I wanted to go into were just generic Space Marine good stuff, which is um, a bunch of two wound models, the 3-up saves, just good stuff. A Lancer, a couple Lancers, a couple Vindicators, maybe a Ballistus or two. Those kind of lists that were going around.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe some Blood Angels, what I kind of want to go into.
Mm-hmm.
But I got two Space Marine matchups that were the horrible, wrong Space Marine matchups to go into.
Yeah, you got the two
Um,
worst ones.
the 3 wounds, the T6, the Gilliman Calgar squad with just Inceptors coming in and just ruining you.
Yeah, it's just
And
brutal.
then the Deathwing Knights. the two Space Marines I would not want to go into.
Yeah, the two out of
Um,
like the 15 available.
yeah, there's so many options and so many detachments, but I had to get the two rough ones out of the 15.
Yeah, I mean, hey, you still managed to get the win on one of them. And the other one that you lost to is one that is arguably a little bit overtuned right now, anyway. So I don't think you should feel too bad about that.
But yeah,
Uh,
no, Tyranids being their high toughness stat check and the one thing that Thunderkin cannot kill.
right, true, yeah, because they don't
Um,
count for the keyword, right? It
nope,
only works for
they don't.
for vehicles, not for monsters. Yeah,
If they had the anti-monster keyword, oh, that would be disgusting. I
yeah, that would
would
be
pay
much better.
120 points for the three of them.
Yeah, that would be more
Um,
favorable.
But yeah, no, Death Guard is definitely again one of those that I did not want to go into.
Hmm.
Because if you have them judged and you're a vehicle, like Land Fortresses judged, now they're on threes. They're engaged, so now it's on fours, offsetting your judgment token.
Hmm.
They give you a -1 to hit because stealth or smoke. Now you're on fives, and then the contagion range. Now you're on sixes.
Yeah, brutal.
So it's very rough, especially when you have your judgment token, your best hitting on threes, and now you're on sixes,
Yeah, yeah.
which
Death
you do
Guard is
not
so good
expect
at
to
that.
ever happen.
I know. It's crazy. Like they're just such a good blunt of an army against like basically anything, and especially things that have very poor BS skills, especially Votan, because we need to have some kind of engagement range to be able to fire effectively into them. And then by that point, we've already entered contagion. So a pretty solid army that gives us a pretty tough game, I would say. And then the last question I had is, given like everything you experienced at this event, like the time you took to relax after the event and just process and digest everything, are there any changes you would be looking to make with this list, or is this kind of what you're going to be running with for a while?
This is probably what I'm going to be running with for a while. It performs extremely well. It does exactly what I want it to do, and every single time I look at building a new list, I tend to go to this exact list. It's like I
Nice.
want Thunderkin for that anti vehicle, and then I'm like three is not enough. Three is very swingy. If you roll two twos and a one, you're not doing anything to a vehicle,
Mm-hmm.
regardless of how well you're hitting. Um, so I felt like 6 man is what I have to take. I didn't want to take a lot of Terminators because I just feel like they're overcosted for their value because you
Mm-hmm.
do have to invest a character to get half of their ability.
Yeah.
Um, I am currently looking at potentially building something for the hearthguard detachment.
Yeah. Okay.
Uh,
Nice. Join us. Join us. Now we're three that are on the Hearthband
I
train.
haven't decided what I'd be throwing into the list, but at the same time, rapid fire with plasmas
Yeah,
sounded
that's
really
nice.
good.
Yeah.
Just having that 10 shots at 832, I believe,
Yeah.
and then it's just so great. And I want to try and build around that. Because also the detachment doesn't say whenever you make a ranged attack +1 AP.
Oh, it's melee
Um,
too. Yeah, man, for sure, for sure.
so
I've
your
been
AP
testing it out.
goes
It's
to AP
great.
3 damage too, and
Yeah,
that's huge.
you can make a solid like anti-marine list with Hearthband. I'm absolutely convinced. Like as soon as this event is done this weekend and I get back home, I am just committing the next like 2 months to playing Hearthband only. I think there's definitely something there. Like you can win an RTT with it. You could go like 3-2 at a GT. I'm convinced. Like there, it sucks compared to Oathbound just because like Oathbound is so good. You get so much value out of like trades. You get it's just like it supports that play style of Voltan, but
I'll
rapid fire
potentially
plasmas.
so my team is hosting a GT in actually just over 3 weeks.
Okay.
So I'll probably take Hearthband there.
Mm-hmm.
If I'd figure out a list. If not, I'm probably gonna take the same list I've just brought to Cherokee.
Okay.
Um, just because the list works extremely well, and the pool that I work with, that like I compete with, my team, are all very very good, incredible players.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you look up just keel haul under the placings,
Okay.
all of us went 5 and 3
Oh wow, nice.
or better.
Okay. Okay.
And then four of us came home with best in faction. So a lot of us are really good players, and if I'm going to test the list, they're definitely the people I would want to test it against.
Yeah, for sure. That's pretty
Um,
cool, man. Are you guys friends going into the hobby, into the competitive scene, or did you meet these guys like along your competitive journey?
so I met them along the competitive journey. Um, a few of them we actually competed against at a team event. So like Park Benjamin and Aiden Dennis, very incredible players. We played against them at ATC February,
Mm-hmm.
which is a team event 5v5. We played against their team, and then we ended up hanging out, talking a little bit, Discord, TTS, practicing a little bit, and then we all ended up forming a team.
Nice.
Like it was great. That's why I also love Warhammer because you see a lot of the same people at these events, whether it's 5 hours away, 2 hours away, 8 hours away.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of the same people or similar people go to these events. You see them over and over again. You establish those friendships, those connections, and again, there a lot of people are really good with their army, and they may be good matchups for you, they may be bad matchups for you, but they're always good for practice.
Mm-hmm. That's nice, man. I think that's a pretty good takeaway message in terms of just like the connections you make, right? Like playing this game and like as you improve as a player, as you attend these events, there's people out there that are doing the exact same thing. And like sometimes you make some really strong and good lasting friendships that also just like give you solid people to practice with and play with, which is awesome. You grow together. And I think that's really nice for like the spirit of the game.
That's all you can really ask for is just good opponents, good friends.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, Ronnie. So thanks so much for walking us through your event, your list, your insight as to how you've been operating and succeeding with the leagues of Votan. And a big congratulations, of course, again for Best in Faction. I think it's absolutely well deserved. I think you have a very creative and unique style when it comes to Votan in terms of leveraging some of these pieces to be a lot more aggressive than people would usually expect, even putting a World Eaters player in his deployment zone, which is pretty crazy. So I think that was really cool, and there's a lot of great insight that I learned speaking with you, and I hope the viewers also take away from this interview as well. So, what else you got going on? I know you mentioned you have your tournament. You want to plug that in, just maybe get people alerted to it. Where can they learn a little bit more about this?
So we are on Instagram. We're also on Twitter or X. We are Keelhaul Gaming, Keel Hall, Haul. Keelhaul Gaming. We are a competitive team in North Carolina. You can follow us on Instagram, follow us on Twitter. I myself am in charge of all the social media for our team. So you'll also be communicating with just me. I'm also in your Discord, so they can also message me. I can give links, put out that kind of
Awesome.
information. But it's going to be the third weekend in March in Jacksonville, North Carolina. If you're in the area, by all means, come in. We always love good and new opponents, or just even just players in general that are learning and wanting to get into the competitive scene. Because we have people of all skill levels, armies. You'll definitely learn a thing or two playing.
That's amazing. Amazing to hear. And I'd strongly recommend anybody in the area, if you have an opportunity and chance to go, take it, go for it, and maybe try to dethrone Ronnie here for Best in Faction. And maybe try some of the things out that you heard in today's video, some of the tactics that Ronnie shared with us. And of course, I'll put a link to the event in the description below for this video as well. So, Ronnie, another big thank you so much, of course, for coming on. Massive congratulations. I think it's incredibly well deserved. I'm excited to see maybe next year at the next Cherokee event what you bring and how you evolve this list and this play style, and of course, to the many more victories to come. Thanks so much for coming on, man. Really appreciate it.
Of course, man. All right, you take it easy.
Thanks. Take care.